The duel inside the Senate chamber was chaos from the start. When Yoda crashed down from that massive fall, it looked like the end for him. His lightsaber had been knocked away. The shockwave rattled the entire chamber, and Sidious was still standing above him like a shadow over the galaxy. But here's the wild part. Yoda wasn't finished. He wasn't dead, and he still had the strength to rise again and keep fighting. Yoda had walked into that confrontation with one clear mission: destroy the Sith once and for all. Yet in that critical moment, something shifted deep inside him. Instead of scrambling to grab his saber and charging back at Sidious, Yoda made a shocking decision. He fled the duel. This wasn't fear, not even close. According to the Revenge of the Sith novelization, Yoda experienced a powerful realization in that very instant. For a brief moment, he pierced through the thick shadow of the dark side and saw the brutal truth of what was unfolding in the galaxy. Victory wasn't just unlikely, it was impossible. Not because Yoda lacked skill, but because the Force itself had already set the stage. And in that chilling moment, the message Yoda felt from the Force was crystal clear. Run. Welcome back to the archives. Today we're diving into the real reason Yoda walked away from Sidious instead of finishing the fight. Because that duel wasn't just a battle, it was two living symbols of the Force colliding in the most dangerous showdown the galaxy had ever seen. This battle wasn't just about strength or flashy lightsaber moves. It was the very soul of the Jedi Order colliding with the ruthless spirit of the Sith. Two living symbols of their orders stood face to face, throwing everything they had into a final showdown that had been building for nearly 1,000 years. That's exactly how Yoda saw it when he marched into Palpatine's office with absolute confidence. The moment he realized the shocking truth that Palpatine was the Sith Lord and that the Chosen One had already fallen, the mission became brutally simple. Yoda looked at Obi-Wan and made it clear. Destroy the Sith we must. As far as they knew, the Jedi Order was finished. Order 66 had shattered their ranks, and the few survivors scattered across the galaxy were silent. Obi-Wan had already sent out a desperate warning telling every surviving Jedi to stay away from Coruscant. No answers came back. For all Yoda knew, it might have just been him and Obi-Wan left standing in the entire galaxy. The Jedi had no army, no council, no support. They were completely on their own now. Still, the mission was clear. Obi-Wan would confront Anakin, a painful task Yoda believed his old student could handle. But the burden of stopping Sidious, that responsibility fell entirely on Yoda's small shoulders. He believed he was the only Jedi powerful enough to face him. With no time for hesitation, Yoda walked straight into Palpatine's office with confidence. But the Sith Lord was ready and about to prove that even a Grand Master could be blinded by arrogance. By the final stretch of the Clone Wars, Yoda had already started seeing the cracks in everything he once trusted. Slowly, the truth that Qui-Gon had spoken about years earlier began hitting him hard. The Jedi had been right about the chaos spreading through the galaxy, but they had been blind to something deeper. They had ignored the living Force. Instead of listening to it, the Jedi Order had turned stiff, rigid, and obsessed with rules. They became servants of a broken republic that was already rotting from the inside. Yoda could see it now, but the realization came painfully late. All he wanted at that point was to end the Clone Wars as fast as possible. Maybe, just maybe, the Jedi Order could still be rebuilt after the war ended. But reality moved faster than hope, and by the time Yoda understood the full truth, it was already too late. During his strange training with the Force priestesses, another realization struck him even deeper. Yoda had formed an attachment of his own, and it wasn't to power or control. His attachment was the Jedi Order itself. He had watched generations of young Jedi grow up under his guidance, like children in his care. Then suddenly, they were gone, wiped out in a single, brutal sweep. Yet, after facing his fears at the wellspring of life, Yoda steadied himself and chose to stand firm in the light. With the resolve of a Grand Master, he faced Sidious head-on. But the Dark Lord was unlike any enemy Yoda had ever battled before, and with every crushing strike, the strain on his aging body became painfully clear. The dark side crashing through the Senate chamber felt overwhelming, stronger than anything Yoda had ever faced before. For a brief moment, he managed to disarm the Emperor, proving the Grand Master was still one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. But that victory didn't last long. Within seconds, Sidious unleashed a storm of dark side fury that felt less like a duel and more like a violent force of nature. Yoda pushed himself harder than ever, digging deep into the light side of the Force and refusing to back down. Every move, every strike, every surge of power was aimed at one goal, finding a way to defeat the Emperor. Yet something deeper was happening during the battle, something Yoda slowly began to understand. With every passing moment, he reached further into the light side than he ever had before. Then suddenly, it happened. Not a breakthrough in the fight itself, but a breakthrough inside his mind. The invisible veil clouding the Force, the dark manipulation created by Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious, finally shattered for him. For the first time in years, Yoda saw the truth clearly. But the truth wasn't comforting. It wasn't a moment of triumph or sudden victory. It was something far worse. The turning point didn't come from a lightning strike or a clean lightsaber hit, even though the chamber echoed with both. It didn't come from acrobatic attacks or perfectly timed blows. Instead, the moment arrived as the battle shifted toward the towering Chancellor's podium. The massive hydraulic platform lifted high above the Senate floor, rising like a steel tower nearly 100 meters into the air. The fight exploded into the center of the giant Senate arena, turning the chamber into a war zone. Through the Force, both warriors ripped entire delegation pods from the Senate walls. Those massive platforms became weapons, battering rams, and crashing projectiles smashing into each other with thunderous force. The arena roared with chaos, the crashing metal echoing like the ghost of the Senate's cheers when the galaxy crowned its new emperor. The moment arrived when the entire legacy of the Jedi suddenly narrowed down to a single figure. The long line of Jedi Masters, the centuries of teachings, the entire light side tradition, all of it now rested on one small warrior standing alone against the darkness. Inside that storm of flashing blades, flying kicks, crackling lightning, and crashing Senate machines, Yoda finally broke through the shadow that had clouded the Force for years. For the first time, the truth hit him with brutal clarity. The reality was devastating. Yoda, the Grand Master, the strongest champion the Jedi Order had ever produced, the living symbol of the light, simply didn't have what it would take to win this fight. And the worst part? He realized he had never truly had it. The battle had been lost long before he even stepped into that chamber. In fact, the seeds of defeat had been planted long before Yoda himself was even born. The Sith had evolved, while the Jedi stood still. For 1,000 years, they studied everything: the Force, Jedi history, their weaknesses, their beliefs, preparing for the exact moment when the final clash would come. The Sith had rebuilt themselves into something entirely new. Meanwhile, the Jedi spent that same 1,000 years training to fight enemies from the past. They were preparing for the last war, while the Sith were building the next one. This new Sith order couldn't simply be cut down with a lightsaber. It couldn't be burned away with raw Force power. The brighter Yoda's light burned, the deeper the shadows around him grew. And in that terrifying instant, Yoda understood something critical. The knowledge he had just gained might still save the galaxy, but only if he survived long enough to pass it on. A problem this is, Yoda realized in that tense moment. As the clash raged on, his vision finally pushed through the thick shadow that had been covering the Force for years. This was the same dark veil the Sith had quietly thrown over the Jedi long before the Clone Wars even reached their peak. Back during the early days of the war, the Jedi Council had already started noticing something strange. Their ability to see the future, the skill that once guided the Order for centuries, was fading fast. Visions became blurry, warnings came too late, and the clarity they once relied on was slipping away. Even Mace Windu, one of the most powerful Jedi Masters alive, was feeling the effects. His rare ability, known as Shatterpoint, allowed him to sense fractures in events, moments where history could suddenly change direction. With that power, Windu could look at a situation and feel where everything might break apart. He could identify the exact moment when a single action or decision would reshape the future forever. The ability even helped him detect weak spots in structures or flaws in an opponent's fighting style. But the dark side fog creeping across the galaxy twisted that power. Windu could still sense the Shatterpoints, but their meaning became unclear, like staring at a cracked mirror through heavy smoke. And if Windu struggled, the rest of the Jedi had it even worse. The dark side clouded the Force so deeply that Jedi seers were nearly useless. Not even Yoda could look ahead and tell whether the future held victory or disaster. By the final days of the war, only those who embraced the dark side seemed able to see through that growing shadow. Others had started sensing the shift in the galaxy long before the final battle. Pong Krell believed a completely new order was rising, and he wanted to secure a place within it. Later in the war, Maul felt the same disturbance in the Force, and even figured out that everything revolved around one man, Anakin Skywalker. Yoda also received his own warning during his strange journey to Dagobah and the Wellspring of Life. Those sacred places were powerful vergences in the Force, locations where the truth could not easily hide. There, Yoda faced visions that forced him to confront his deepest fears and failures. He never believed the future was completely fixed. The Force always allowed for change. But the visions showed him something serious, a massive warning about the path the galaxy was heading toward. Yoda finally began to understand the real problem. The Jedi had been searching for the dark side hidden inside the Republic, while the Sith had already turned the entire war itself into a weapon. That terrifying realization raised one brutal question. How do you defeat darkness when the battlefield itself belongs to it? That answer came to Yoda during the duel. He tried to rise again after being thrown across the Senate chamber, his body aching and his strength nearly gone. In that painful moment, the truth settled in. The Sith had already secured their victory. But instead of giving in to despair, Yoda made a different choice. He set aside the old Jedi arrogance, the belief that the Order alone could protect the Republic. He remembered the wisdom of Qui-Gon and finally listened to the Force. And the message was clear. Yoda's role was no longer to be a warrior, and no longer to fight this battle with a lightsaber. Yoda fought with everything he had. No one could say the Grand Master didn't give that battle his full strength. But in the end, he understood something powerful. The fight he was in was not a fight he was meant to win. So Yoda chose to stop fighting. Not because he was afraid, and not because he lacked courage. He fled because he carried something far more important than pride. He carried knowledge and hope for the future. And that hope could not be allowed to die in the Senate chamber that night. When Yoda later tells Bail Organa that he must go into exile and that he had failed, many assume he meant he failed to defeat Palpatine or failed to save the Republic. But the truth runs deeper than that. Yoda believed he failed because he didn't understand the truth sooner. He failed to pierce the dark veil earlier. He allowed the rigid thinking and pride of the Jedi Order to cloud his judgment. By continuing to fight in that moment, he realized he was playing directly into the Sith's plan. So Yoda stepped away from the battlefield. He accepted exile and chose patience over pride. The Force had shown him that the future depended on something new, a different path that had not yet appeared. Years later, when Luke Skywalker finally arrived, Yoda tested him by acting strange and even annoying on purpose. When Luke showed impatience, Yoda grew uneasy because he saw echoes of Anakin in the young student. But Obi-Wan reminded him of the promise he made, to trust the will of the Force this time. That promise kept Yoda from rushing back into battle or seeking revenge against Sidious. Instead, Yoda embraced a new role. Not a warrior, not a general, but a teacher. And that change is perfectly summed up in the lesson he gave Luke. War does not make one great. And that right there is the real reason Yoda walked away from Sidious. After breaking down that massive duel step by step, a lot of people still argue that Yoda could have stood back up and kept fighting. Some even say he might have beaten Palpatine if he pushed just a little harder. But that argument misses the deeper point completely. Maybe Yoda could have gotten back up. Maybe he even had enough strength left to keep swinging his lightsaber. But doing that would have meant playing directly into Sidious's plan. The Sith had already twisted the battlefield itself into their weapon. Every strike, every clash of power, every act of violence fed the darkness that had already taken over the galaxy. Even if Yoda somehow defeated Sidious in that moment, the truth remained brutal. The Jedi Order had already been shattered. The Republic had turned against them, the galaxy no longer trusted them, and the light side had nearly been wiped out. Even if both Sidious and Vader had fallen that day, the damage had already been done. So the Force delivered a different message to Yoda. It was time for patience, time for healing, time to reconnect with the living Force and wait for the right moment. That's why Yoda ran not out of fear, but out of hope. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like, subscribe, and share the video. Thanks for spending time here in the archives today, and I'll see you all in the next one.